My name is Arya Sterling, and I am 34 years old. For as long as I can remember, my younger sister, Serafina, has existed in a brighter, warmer patch of sunlight than I have. It wasn't a shadow she cast, but a certain luminescence she possessed, one that drew all eyes and left me in a gentle, temperate shade. As children, it was my meticulously organized seashell collection that would find its way into her shoebox, rearranged into a chaotic jumble she called art. As teenagers, it was the boy I'd spent a summer shyly crushing on who she would charm with a single, dazzling smile. I learned, over the years, to build quiet fortresses around the things I held dear. But nothing I had ever built could have prepared me for the evening of my 34th birthday. As we sat in a restaurant overlooking the steely gray waters of Puget Sound, Serafina stood, her hand resting on her stomach, and announced her pregnancy. The father, she declared with a tremor of triumph in her voice, was my husband, Julian. In that moment, the world didn't crack, it simply dissolved, like a watercolor painting left out in the Seattle rain. What neither of them knew was that I was holding a truth of my own, a quiet, solid thing that would not dissolve, but would instead shatter the delicate glass of their fantasy. Growing up as Serafina's older sister was an exercise in quiet observation. I was born first, a contemplative, serious child who preferred books to boisterous games. For years later, Serafina arrived like a firework, all sparkle and noise. My parents, practical, hardworking people, were utterly captivated. It wasn't that they loved me less, they simply loved her with more exclamation points. Look at Serafina's finger painting. She's a true artist, my mother would exclaim, taping the chaotic swirl of primary colors to the fridge. My own carefully rendered pencil drawings of our garden, anatomically correct down to the last petal, would receive a quiet, "That's lovely, dear," before being placed in a folder. My father, who patiently taught Serafina to ride a bike over a dozen wobbly afternoons, was always claimed by a meeting or a project when my swim meets came around. These were not cruelties, but small, cumulative erosions of presence, teaching me to be self-sufficient, to rely on the steadfast ground of my own capabilities. Serafina, in turn, learned a different lesson, that what she wanted, she could have. It was a pattern that defined our lives. My first cashmere sweater, saved for with months of babysitting money, vanished from my closet only to reappear on her at a school dance, a small snag near the cuff. When I won the citywide scholarship for a young architects program, Serafina suddenly developed a passion for interior design, and my parents paid for a series of expensive workshops to nurture her newfound talent. The family refrain, always directed at me, was, "Can you just be happy for your sister?" And so I learned to be happy for her, or at least to perform a convincing imitation of it, while I built my own life brick by sturdy brick, far from the dazzling, chaotic orbit of her world. University was my sanctuary. I moved to the opposite coast, immersing myself in the demanding world of architectural studies at Columbia. For the first time, I was judged not in relation to my sister, but on the merit of my own work, the clarity of my vision. It was there, amidst the libraries and late-night drafting sessions, that I met Julian. Julian Thorne was a whirlwind of easy charm and sharp intelligence, studying finance with an ambition that matched my own. He walked into my life during a shared elective on the history of urban design. He'd spilled his coffee on my blueprints for a theoretical community center, and his apology was so profuse, so genuinely mortified, that I couldn't help but laugh. He insisted on buying me dinner to atone, and that dinner stretched into hours of conversation that felt like coming home. He listened, truly listened, when I spoke about the interplay of light and space, about the way a building could shape the lives of the people within it. "I've never met anyone who sees the world the way you do, Arya," he told me, his gaze full of a wonder I'd never seen directed at myself. "It's like you're building the future." For the first time, I felt not just seen, but understood. Our relationship was a beautiful, well-designed structure. We were partners in every sense, supporting each other's careers as we moved to Seattle after graduation, drawn by the city's blend of urban innovation and natural beauty. When he proposed 2 years later, at the peak of a sunrise hike overlooking the Cascades, the world felt solid and full of promise. I had finally built something for myself that Serafina couldn't touch. The wedding planning, however, brought her back into the center of my life. She was living in Seattle by then, a rising star in a high-end real estate firm, a job that perfectly suited her talent for selling a dream. My mother, with her unerring instinct for maintaining a fragile peace, insisted that Serafina be my maid of honor. It would mean the world to her, Arya. And to us. I should have seen the warnings, etched like hairline cracks in the foundation. She wore a cream-colored dress to my bridal shower, a shade just a breath away from white. Her toast at the rehearsal dinner was a rambling, humorous anecdote about her own dating life, with only a passing mention of Julian and me. At the wedding itself, she wept more dramatically than my mother, and spent the reception charming Julian's cousins, her laughter a little too loud, her hand lingering on their arms a little too long. Julian, ever my protector, squeezed my hand. "She just wants to be the star of every show," he whispered into my ear. "Don't let it bother you. Tonight is about us." And I believed him. The first few years of our marriage were a golden age. We bought a beautiful craftsman house in Queen Anne, its wooden floors and leaded glass windows a testament to enduring quality. We poured our hearts into it. I designed a new kitchen, and Julian built the garden beds himself. We spoke of children, but Julian was hesitant. "Let's just have a few more years of it being just us," he'd say. "We have so much time." I respected his caution, interpreting it as a desire to build an unshakable foundation for our future family. But about a year ago, the foundation began to shift. The tremors were small at first. Julian started working later, his explanations vague. "Just a big merger," he'd say, his eyes not quite meeting mine. His phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now perpetually face down or in his pocket. He changed his passwords, claiming a new company security protocol. The easy intimacy we shared, the casual touches and late-night talks, was replaced by a polite, careful distance. We were becoming two people coexisting in a beautifully designed house, the space between us growing wider and colder. "It's just stress, Arya," he'd reassure me whenever I tried to breach the silence. "Once this deal closes, everything will go back to the way it was." But it never did. I started noticing things I didn't want to see. The scent of a perfume on his coat, a heady, expensive floral I knew wasn't mine, but was hauntingly familiar. A single, long blonde hair on the passenger seat of his car. Serafina was a natural blonde. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the ghosts of my childhood insecurities were creating phantoms in my marriage. Serafina and Julian were in-laws, of course. They saw each other at family functions. Of course, he might give her a ride. I tried to reason away the cold knot of dread in my stomach. As my 34th birthday approached, I clung to the hope that it could be a turning point, a new beginning. Julian promised a special evening. My parents, eager to help, booked a table at the Glass Heron, a restaurant I adored for its panoramic views and quiet elegance. I chose my dress with care, a deep sapphire silk that Julian had always loved. I was determined to find my way back to my husband, to repair the cracks in the beautiful life we had built. Staring at my reflection before we left, I whispered a silent prayer into the mirror. "Let tonight be different." I had no idea how profoundly that prayer would be answered. The Glass Heron was a haven of quiet sophistication, all polished wood, soft lighting, and a wall of windows that offered a breathtaking view of Puget Sound, where ferries glided like silent ghosts across the dark water. The air smelled of salt and cedar and the delicate aroma of seared scallops. I'd always loved it here, had always felt a sense of peace. Mrs. Thorne, the hostess, greeted me with a warm smile. "Your family is already at the table." Julian had texted minutes before, a rushed message about being stuck on a conference call. "Meet you there. Don't wait for me." My parents rose as I approached. My mother, elegant in a tailored suit, gave me an air kiss. "Happy birthday, dear. That color is lovely on you, though perhaps a simpler necklace would have been better." My father gave me a brief, solid hug. "Happy birthday, Arya. Your mother and I got you a little something." I accepted the familiar, gentle critique and the small, tastefully wrapped gift with a practiced smile. "Thank you for arranging this, Mom. It's perfect." Serafina wasn't there, which was typical. She had a flair for dramatic entrances. I sat down, the empty chair beside me a silent rebuke. "Julian's running late," I explained. "Work." My father nodded, his expression sympathetic. "That's the price of success. Julian's a good man, a hard worker." We ordered drinks, and I asked for sparkling water, wanting to save my first glass of wine for a toast with my husband. Just as the waiter departed, a ripple of energy went through the restaurant. Serafina had arrived. She was a vision in a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin, her blonde hair a bright beacon in the muted room. But it wasn't her entrance that made my breath catch in my throat. It was the man holding the door for her, his hand resting for a moment too long on the small of her back. It was Julian. They moved toward our table, their steps in sync, a shared smile passing between them that was far too intimate for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law who had supposedly just run into each other in the car park. "Sorry we're late," Serafina chirped, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Her perfume, that same heady floral I'd smelled on Julian's coat, enveloped me. Can you believe it? I ran into this guy in the lift. Small world. Julian avoided my gaze as he slid into the seat beside me, giving my shoulder a perfunctory squeeze. "Happy birthday, Arya." The call ran long. He smelled of fresh air and the faint, lingering scent of Serafina's perfume. The lie was so blatant it was almost insulting. "I'm just glad you're both here," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. The meal passed in a blur of polite conversation. My parents recounted their recent trip to the San Juan Islands. Serafina dominated the conversation with tales of a record-breaking property sale and the celebrity client she'd charmed. Julian was a ghost at the table, quiet and withdrawn, his eyes fixed on his plate. I rested my hand on his knee beneath the table, a silent plea for connection. He flinched, a barely perceptible tremor, before covering my hand with his. His skin was cool and damp. The gifts were exchanged. My parents gave me a gift certificate to a local spa, thoughtful, yet impersonal. Julian's gift was a pair of diamond earrings, beautiful and expensive, but they felt generic, like something a personal shopper might have chosen. Serafina presented me with a silk scarf in a bold pattern. "It's so you," she declared, though she knew I preferred subtle, solid colors. Finally, the waiter brought a small, exquisite dessert, a deconstructed lemon tart with a single candle flickering in its center. My father raised his glass. A toast. "To my oldest daughter, Arya. On her 34th birthday. We are so proud of the stable, beautiful life you've built for yourself." Stable. The word landed like a stone. Dependable. Unsurprising. Safe. As my family began to sing, I saw Serafina exchange a look with Julian, a glance full of nervous excitement and shared purpose. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. Actually, Serafina interrupted, her voice cutting through the last notes of the song. "Before Arya blows out her candle, I have an announcement." And I thought, what better time than a family celebration? All eyes turned to her. She rose from her chair, her movements slow and deliberate, and placed a hand over her flat stomach. The gesture was theatrical, practiced. "I wasn't going to say anything just yet," she began, her eyes shining with a strange, feverish light. "But since we're all here, I'm pregnant." The silence was broken by my mother's delighted gasp. My father's face broke into a wide, unguarded grin. "Serafina, that's wonderful news. When are you due? Who's the lucky guy?" "I'm about 10 weeks along," Serafina said, her hand still protectively on her abdomen. She paused, letting the suspense build, her gaze locking with mine across the table. "But there's more." And then, with a voice full of devastating, triumphant pride, she delivered the final blow. "Julian's the father. We've been in love for months. We're going to be a family." The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking of cutlery, the murmur of other conversations faded into a dull roar. At our table, a pocket of absolute silence formed, thick and suffocating. My father's wine glass paused halfway to his lips. My mother's smile collapsed, her expression shifting from joy to utter confusion. I I don't understand, she stammered, looking from Serafina to Julian, then to me. Julian is Aria's husband. Julian stared at the white tablecloth, his face a mask of guilt. This isn't how we wanted to tell you, he mumbled, his words directed at the table, not at me. We. I repeated. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Serafina reached across the table, her perfectly manicured hand covering Julian's. We were going to wait, but I couldn't keep it a secret anymore. It's real, what we have. Her eyes, glittering with a victory she had clearly savored for weeks, found mine again. We're a family now, Aria. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. My birthday. My favorite restaurant. My husband. She hadn't just taken him. She was performing the theft, turning my deepest pain into her celebratory announcement. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a meticulously planned demolition. When? I asked, my voice a stranger's, low and steady. When did it start? Julian winced. Does it matter? It was at your New Year's party, Serafina supplied, clearly relishing her role as the historian of my heartbreak. Remember when I lost my earring and Julian helped me look for it in the garden? She gave a small, tinkling laugh that grated on my raw nerves. We were out there for a while. 8 months. 8 months of lies, of secret meetings, of stolen moments while I was trying to rebuild the bridge between my husband and me, not knowing he was burning it down from the other side. Every late night, every secret text, every flimsy excuse now clicked into place, forming a picture of betrayal so clear I felt foolish for not having seen it sooner. My father found his voice. I think this is a discussion for a more private setting. There's no need for privacy, Dad, Serafina said brightly, stroking her stomach. We're all family. And soon, there'll be one more. Your first grandchild. Isn't that wonderful? I watched in numb disbelief as my mother's gaze softened. The word grandchild was a powerful anesthetic, numbing the shock of the betrayal. A baby, she breathed. Well, the circumstances are complicated. But a baby is always a blessing. Of course. This was the family pattern. Serafina's transgressions were always reframed, her mistakes repackaged as romantic adventures, her selfish acts forgiven. Arya, Julian said, finally looking at me, his eyes full of a pathetic mixture of pity and relief. I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I need to use the restroom, I said, my chair scraping against the floor as I stood. I walked away from the table on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The bathroom was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the emotional inferno I'd left behind. I locked myself in a stall, pressing my forehead against the cold steel of the door. I waited for the tears, for the ragged, gut-wrenching sobs. They didn't come. Instead, a strange, crystalline calm settled over me. This was devastating, yes, but it wasn't surprising. It was simply the logical conclusion of a lifetime of patterns. Serafina takes. Julian is weak. My parents enable. The equation was brutally simple. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back seemed different. The soft hope in her eyes had been replaced by something harder, something like polished stone. I calmly reapplied my lipstick, my hand perfectly steady. You will not fall apart, I told my reflection. Not for them. When I returned, they were talking about baby names. My parents, Julian and Serafina, were huddled together, their voices low, as if I were a ghost at my own birthday party. They fell silent as I slid back into my seat. You've certainly made this a memorable birthday, I said, my voice even. I picked up my fork. But I would like to finish my dessert. Serafina stared at me, her triumphant smile faltering. This was not the melodrama she had anticipated. She was expecting tears, accusations, a scene that would cast her as the reluctant homewrecker and me as the hysterical, wronged wife. Arya, Julian began, his voice placating. We need to talk about arrangements. I held up a hand. Later. Right now, I am eating my lemon tart. I took a bite. The sharp, sweet flavor exploded on my tongue. It was delicious. I took another. Did you think I would scream and cry? I asked the stunned faces around the table. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I do have my emotions, but unlike some people, I don't feel the need to make them a public performance. I set my fork down gently. Besides, there's something you all ought to know before you start picking out nursery colors. I let the silence stretch, savoring the flicker of uncertainty in Serafina's eyes. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single, folded sheet of paper I'd carried with me for 2 months, waiting for the right moment. I had never imagined the right moment would be this one. I've known about the affair since June, I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table. Julian's head snapped up. What? You should be more careful with your credit card statements, Julian. That weekend getaway to the coast, the charges from that little inn in Cannon Beach. It's a lovely place. I've always wanted to go. I paused. After I saw that, I hired a private investigator. Stonebridge Investigations. They're very discreet, but very thorough. They have photographs, Julian, of you and Serafina. At her apartment. In her car. They even have a recording of you booking that hotel room, describing it as a romantic surprise for your girlfriend. Serafina's face went white. Julian looked like he'd been punched. You spied on me, he choked out, his voice thick with outrage. I gathered evidence of my husband's infidelity. I corrected him. And 2 months ago, I retained Isabel Croft. She's the best divorce attorney in Seattle. The petition is already drafted, Julian, along with a full accounting of our shared assets and a copy of our prenuptial agreement. Isabel advised me to wait for the most opportune moment to serve you the papers. I suppose this is it. The triumphant glow had completely vanished from Serafina's face, replaced by dawning horror. She wasn't the one holding all the cards. She had just revealed her hand, only to find out I was holding a royal flush. My mother was weeping silently. A divorce? Arya, no. You can't just give up. With counseling. Mom, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Some things can't be counseled away. I turned my gaze back to my sister. And there's one more thing. Something that makes your little announcement especially problematic. I slid the folded paper across the table towards Julian. He stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. Julian had a vasectomy 3 years ago, I stated calmly. We decided together that we weren't going to have children. He was very certain about it. The world seemed to stop. Serafina stared at me, then at Julian, her mouth opening and closing silently. That's not possible, she finally whispered. You're lying. The medical report is right there, I said, nodding towards the paper. From the Virginia Mason Clinic. Dr. Kendrick performed the procedure. I remember it clearly. Julian spent a weekend on the sofa with a bag of frozen peas while I brought him soup. One of the junior architects on my team, a kind, quiet man named Rowan, started leaving a cup of tea on my desk in the mornings. No conversation, just a simple, warm offering. It was a small gesture of kindness that felt monumental. 3 months after my birthday, Serafina called again. Her voice was different. Subdued, but clear. I'm in therapy, Arya, she said. I'm trying to figure out why I am the way I am. She told me she had contacted the baby's real father, a married colleague from her firm named David. He had been shocked, but had agreed to a DNA test. I have to take responsibility, she said. For everything. I listened without comment, a silent observer of her slow, painful reconstruction. Forgiveness felt like a distant country I had no visa for, but for the first time, I felt a sliver of something other than anger. It was a detached, clinical pity. 1 year after that night at the Glass Heron, I stood in my loft, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. The space felt lived in, a reflection of the woman I was becoming. The divorce was a closed chapter. The house in Queen Anne had sold, and my half of the proceeds was invested. A nest egg for a future I was now free to imagine on my own terms. Serafina had given birth to a son, Theo. The DNA test had confirmed David was the father. He had left his wife and was now, tentatively, building a life with Serafina and their son. My sister had sent me a photograph, a tiny, sleeping baby swaddled in a blue blanket. I had looked at his peaceful, innocent face and felt not a trace of connection to Julian, only a profound sense of relief. My relationship with my family was a work in progress, a slow and careful renovation. Last month, Serafina had sent a handwritten letter. I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, she wrote. But I hope one day you can understand that my actions came from a place of deep brokenness, not malice. I am trying to heal for Theo's sake and for my own. After reading it, I did something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I drove to her house. I held my nephew in my arms. He was small and warm and smelled of milk and fresh beginnings. He's beautiful, Serafina, I said, and the words were true. Would you be his godmother? She asked, her eyes full of a vulnerability I'd never seen. I want him to have a strong, good woman in his life. I want him to have you. I looked from her tear-streaked face to the tiny baby in my arms. Yes, I said, surprising myself. I will. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a bridge. A narrow, fragile footbridge across a vast canyon of pain. The doorbell chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Rowan, here to take me to my 35th birthday dinner. It was a small gathering with Zoe and a few other close friends at a cozy trattoria downtown, a deliberate act of reclaiming the date. He smiled, handing me a small, square gift. Happy birthday, Arya. Inside the box was a beautiful, leather-bound journal. On the first page, in elegant script, he had written a quote by the poet Rilke, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final." Tears pricked my eyes. It's perfect, I whispered. As we walked out into the cool evening air, the city lights beginning to sparkle, I felt a profound sense of peace. The terror had happened, but so had the beauty. I had lost a husband, a sister, and the life I thought I wanted. But I had found myself. I had learned that my strength wasn't in the walls I built to protect myself, but in my ability to tear them down and build something new and more authentic from the rubble. I had learned that self-worth wasn't a gift bestowed by others, but a foundation I had to lay for myself, piece by painful, deliberate piece. At the restaurant, my friends greeted me with hugs and laughter. The table was full of warmth and genuine affection. I looked at their faces, these people who formed my chosen family, and I felt not stable, but alive. Grounded. Free. Happy birthday, Arya, they toasted, their glasses raised high. And as I smiled, a real, unburdened smile, I raised my glass to them, and to myself. The architect of my own life. Before we begin, I'd love to hear where everyone is watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal. Share this video if someone you know needs to hear that healing is possible, even after the worst betrayals. I read all your comments and appreciate your support more than you know. Now let's celebrate.